Good. Ke di konkoretsa ba bona mabona.
I wanted to ask, it's the Q&A. If there's somebody who's gonna, besides the, let's say, the main speaker, can they come to the podium and not speak from
No,
here?
yes, they'll come from, yes, they'll speak from here,
All the
madam.
mics are here.
Yeah. Thanks, Kap.
11 feet.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Electoral Commission of South Africa. My name is Kate Papela, the national spokesperson. I'll be chairing this morning's press briefing. A warm welcome to the nucleus of elections, IEC head office in Centurion. This morning this is the third in a series of quarterly media briefings that have been scheduled by the Electoral Commission to ensure that we're getting ready for the 2026 municipal elections, local government elections. Joining me in this press briefing this morning, I'm joined by Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Shiburi, as well as Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Mosri. They'll be ensuring that the nation is briefed on key developments around our preparations for next year's elections. Without much waste of time, let me welcome also people that have joined us online who are following up this media briefing, and also they'll be allowed to share questions as well. And then after the press briefing, we'll be taking questions. I'm going to allow the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Shiburi, to brief the nation on developments on the local government elections coming up in 2026. Ntate Shiburi, if you may come through.
Good morning. Today's briefing follows the successful execution of several key milestones within the mandate of the Electoral Commission. It does this by giving an account of performance in the past quarter as well as the current quarter, and looking forward to indicate the accelerations in preparations for elections that must lawfully be held between November 2026 and no later than the end of January 2027. In the area of voter registration, the Commission is encouraged by a number of South Africans who have acted on the call to register and update their details through various convenient platforms. From January to September 2025, over 300,000 people have registered as first-time voters. Additionally, 60,000 persons have updated their registration details either because they've moved residence or they have changed addresses. The highest number of the new registrations occurred in the month of September, which accounted for 71,324 new registrations, followed by August with 50,714 new registrations, as well as the month of February with 39,967 registration. On average, the Electoral Commission registered over 33,912 new registrations per month. Sadly, in the same period, we lose on average about 31,000 persons owing to death. Of the total 305 new registrations, 76% of those were voters who were registered using the voter management device or VMD phecelezi. 12% were persons who registered themselves using the online voter registration portal, while 10% were persons who registered at our network of local IEC offices. This is a reflection that more and more South Africans, especially young first-time voters, are embracing digital innovations and the Electoral Commission's ongoing drive to make registration simpler, smarter, and accessible. Despite these registrations, however, a lot more citizens must still register, and we encourage all eligible voters to use the convenience of our self-registration platforms to register or to update their voter registrations details. Voters are once again reminded to register where they live and to vote where they are registered. A voter who, since registration, has moved a place of residence are encouraged to visit our website to check their registration details and, if necessary, to update those details. We now turn to a second area of briefing, which is the annual report. In this regard, the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs considered the Electoral Commission's 2024-2025 annual report on 14 October 2025. The report reflects strong performance and commitment to excellence on the part of the Electoral Commission. The report continues to demonstrate strong performance across all operational areas, including electoral operations, political funding, civic and democracy education, as well as in governance. Building on 5 consecutive clean audits, the Commission is proud to have achieved 92% of its key performance targets during the 2024-2025 reporting period. We now provide an update on political funding. In this regard, the Commission reports a 90% compliance rate among represented political parties, with 18 of the 20 represented political parties having submitted their audited financial statement on time. The 2 parties that did not submit their audited financial statements on time have been issued with directives to comply and to submit those outstanding documents. Those parties are 1, National Coloured Congress, as well as Build One South Africa. Similarly, of the 438 unrepresented political parties, only 28% of those complied with the requirements to submit financial records accompanied by an affidavit. The Commission has therefore served notices on 304 of those unrepresented political parties with direction to comply with the Political Funding Act. As it relates to electronic voting, we had in the past indicated that we are undertaking consultation processes across the breadth of the country to receive submissions from South Africans on the feasibility of electronic voting. The period for submissions closed on the 30th of September, and we have received in excess of 200 submissions on our email address and on our online platforms. Similarly, the Commission has undertaken over 20 provincial stakeholders' engagements in all the 9 provinces to get submissions from South Africans. The key highlights of submissions from these consultative forums are the following. 1, that e-voting must be preceded by a cautious, phased, and pilot-driven approach before we adopt electronic voting. Secondly, that in order to engender trust, the migration to e-voting must follow a hybrid approach. In other words, where we retain the paper ballot alongside the introduction of technology in elections. That adoption of e-voting must be preceded by strong nationwide voter education programs on e-voting technologies. That a particular focus must be placed on ensuring accessibility of all citizens, including persons in rural areas and those living with disabilities. That there is a need for significant public investment in digital infrastructure to make wall-to-wall implementation of e-voting possible. And that there must be a robust legislative framework prior to the introduction of e-voting technologies. Going forward, we will consolidate the received submissions, and once finalized, we will revise the draft policy paper, which will be submitted to Parliament for consideration. Just to state the obvious, electronic voting is not on the cards for the next general elections of municipal councils. We now turn our attention to preparations for the elections that must happen, as I said, between November 2026 and no later than January 2027. Ahead of the general elections of the municipal councils, the Commission has put forward proposals for legislative amendments to electoral legislation. The primary subject of this proposal of proposed amendments is Section 15 of the Electoral Act. Currently, this section allows objection to the voter's roll at any stage. The Commission proposes a number of amendments to ensure proper administration of elections. So the proposed amendments by the Commission are fourfold. One is to make it clear that objections are only competent against the provisionally compiled voters' roll. In other words, the voters' roll that has not yet been certified for use in an election. This is necessary in order to facilitate certainty in preparations for an impending elections. The second one is to clothe the Commission with remedies that it could consider in deciding an objection to a provisionally compiled voters' roll. Such remedies could include, but are not limited to, the removal of an address where such is in dispute, thereby ensuring that a voter will provide the address before they are allowed to vote at a voting station. The third amendment is to provide for the automatic deregistration of political parties that are not represented. In other words, a political party that does not have a seat in a municipal council, in a provincial legislature, or at the National Assembly, and that has not updated or given notice of its continued existence. So if a party fails to give notice, the registration of that party will automatically lapse. The last amendment is to clarify that only registered political parties on the date on which an election is called may nominate candidates. The Commission is scheduled to present the draft bill to the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs on the 18th of November 2025. We move now to the area of ward delimitations. Ahead of each general election of municipal councils, the Municipal Demarcation Board must delimit ward boundaries. In this regard, we confirm that the board has briefed the Commission on the progress it has registered in its cycle of ward delimitation, and that the MDB will hand over to the Commission the new ward boundaries early in December 2025. The handover of wards by the MDB to the Commission will enable the Electoral Commission to proceed with the next phase of preparations for local government elections, including aligning voting districts to the new ward boundaries that will take effect on voting day. The next area on which we provide an update relates to the election of representatives. And we start with by-elections to replace vacancies in wards. Between April 2025 to today, the Commission has administered 57 ward by-elections. The highest number of vacancies arose in the provinces of the Eastern Cape and Gauteng municipalities with 11 ward vacancies each, followed by the municipalities in the province of Western Cape with 9 vacancies and 7 ward vacancies in municipalities in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. The conduct of by-elections is regulated by the Local Government Municipal Structures Act of 1998, which generally requires that a by-election must be held no later than 90 days from the date on which a vacancy arose. However, the law recognizes that if by-elections were to be held very close to the general elections of all municipalities, there may be confusion and challenges imposed on voters and electoral stakeholders. With this recognition, Section 25(6) of the Structures Act creates an exemption. In other words, it provides that within certain times, by-elections may be held in abeyance until after the general elections of municipal councils. In this regard, the period of cessation of by-elections will start on the 30th of April 2026. In other words, all by-elections that occur after the 30th of April 2026 will not be administered. They will be held over until after the next general elections of municipalities. So beyond the 30th of April 2026, it is not competent for the member of an executive council to call and set a date for a by-election. The cessation of by-elections, as the name suggests, only applies to by-election. It does not extend to proportional representative councillors who may be replaced until a day before the general elections. Between April and October 2025, the Electoral Commission replaced 183 PR councillors. On average, the Commission replaces 377 PR councillors in a financial year. Registration of political parties is continuous. Therefore, since the 2024 national and provincial elections, the Commission has registered a total of 62 new political parties. 14 of the new parties were registered in the period between August 2025 and October 2025. The register of parties currently stands at 508 parties. Of these 508, 295 are registered at a national level. In other words, they can contest all elections of all municipalities, all provincial legislatures, as well as for seats in the National Assembly. 404 are parties that are either in preparation for next year's election. The Commission has started a series of liaisons political parties, aspirant independent candidates to share information on, among other things, the requirements to contest, how votes are translated into seats, and how to go about to register a party. On the bottom of page 5, we list the indicative date on which the information sessions will be held, on the basis that there will be at least one session in a major center in each of the 9 provinces. Voter education and civic education is ongoing. It is not an activity that the Commission undertakes only ahead of an election. In Q2, the voter education drive reached more than 2.6 million people through over 18,000 community events held across all the 9 provinces. This engagement focused on encouraging and preparing first-time voters, promoting active participation, and fostering responsible citizenship among young South Africans ahead of future elections. The preponderance of these events were in KwaZulu-Natal, with 4,222 events reaching over 317,000 people, followed by the province of the Eastern Cape with 2,729 events reaching 415 people, Gauteng with 2,480 events reaching 81,000 persons, Western Cape with 1,905 events reaching over 46,000 persons, Limpopo with 2,387 events reaching 1.4 million persons, Northern Cape with 660 events reaching 185 people, Mpumalanga with 1,547 events reaching 46,000 persons, Free State 1,124 events reaching 25,000 people, and the Northwest with 1,581 events reaching about 45,000 persons. At the last briefing, we had indicated that there were 3 vacancies that will fall due on the 4th of November 2026, because the term of office of 3 commissioners would expire today. In this regard, the Commission extends its gratitude to the Chief Justice and the panel that she constituted to expedite the process and working diligently to ensure that she could present her recommendations to Parliament, for Parliament to process and in turn submit to the President for consideration and decision. The Commission welcomes the announcement by President Ramaphosa of the appointment of 3 commissioners to fill the 3 vacancies on the Electoral Commission. The names of the commissioners are as follows: Ms. Joyce Pito, she has been appointed as a new commissioner for a term of 7 years. It is her first term. Judge Daya Pillay has been appointed as a part-time commissioner for a term of 7 years. It is her second term. Mr. Mosotho Moepya has been appointed as a commissioner for a term of 7 years, and that will be his second term as a commissioner. Additionally, the President has also designated Mr. Mosotho Moepya as chairperson of the Electoral Commission. As we conclude this statement, we look ahead to 2026. We call on all eligible voters to get ready to make their voices heard through the ballot box. Now is the time to register and to ensure that you vote to continue to shape affairs in your community and also have a say in the selection of the men and women who will administer our public affairs on our behalf. The statement ends. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, DC Oshiburi. I'm going to open the floor for questions. Please introduce yourself as well as the media house that you represent in the upcoming municipal elections, local government elections. We confirm that you register where you live, you vote where you are registered. On that note, I've opened the floor for questions. Please proceed. I'll take 3 questions and then allow the DCOs to respond.
Isaac Mahlangu from, can you hear me? Isaac Mahlangu from the Sunday Times.
Let me just check if the sound booth is giving us a bit of volume there. Just put the mic closer to you. Switch it on. Thank you.
It's on the side.
Okay.
Isaac Mahlangu from the Sunday Times.
Much
You mentioned that in the last 8 months, January to September, you've had 300,000 new registration. When we compare to the same period ahead of the last local government election, how does that compare? Are we seeing an improvement, or is it below, or is it just on the same level?
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's Natasha Piri here from SABC News. I just have a couple of questions in regards to just the consultations about the exact date of the elections. Is that consultation still happening? Can you perhaps give us a definite date? Because the last time you had said it's any time between November and January. In terms of the Municipal Demarcation Board, I'm covered. Just out of interest sake, and Adeshuburi, in terms of the legislative amendments, are you not worried that perhaps time may not be on your side if you're going to table this before Parliament, as a draft bill, and the elections are also next year? Are you not worried about the time constraints? And then furthermore, I don't know if the IEC commissioners have had a chance to actually look at the Commission of Gender Equality. They released an elections report, and they've made a number of recommendations there for the Commission. If you have read the report, can you perhaps give us an overview of what you think about the report and some of the recommendations that were made there? Yeah, I think I'm covered for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Sesi.
Katlego Sohoto from Kaya 959. Mr. Shiburi, considering the opening window for the election date starting in November, I imagine with the consultations taking place, are things like the summer rains, matric exams, being considered in those consultative talks? And I mean, perhaps in line with my colleague's question, Natasha, how committed are we to a date in November?
Thank you so much. I'll take the last round of questions when I get back.
Thank you, Katlego and Natasha. Let's group the responses on consultations. Indeed, consultations still are ongoing. The Commission has commenced with the Minister. The Minister at the last meeting indicated that he was consulting with Cabinet. The planning scenario considered a number of things. One, examinations for the matriculants, examination for tertiary institutions, inclement weather in most parts of the country around that period. And at the end, internally, we had 3 possible scenarios. But because the Commission does not determine the date of an election, and as it has always done, its role is to stand ready at the first day on which an election may be called. Because if we do not stand ready on that day, we are invariably taking away the decision-making from the Minister. So we stand ready to administer an election on the first Wednesday in November, assuming the election will be in November. If the Minister determines a date later in November, early in December or sometime in January, we will adjust our plans. So there's notionally a number of Wednesdays within that window period on which an election may be held. Each one of those Wednesdays has its advantages and its disadvantages. And I think that those are the things that have been considered before a decision is made on which Wednesday within that window period. Isaac, the comparison, 305, let me put it this way. Outside of an election year, the voters' roll experiences what we call a phenomenon of net decline. What do we mean by that? While we register people continuously, we do not register enough people to reverse the net loss that we estimate to be 31,000 each month as by way of death and people leaving the voters' roll. However, this time alone, the 305 is a high yield given that there is no election in sight. And it cannot be compared to the same period last year because the same period last year we benefited from an election that was known and we had 2 general voter registration drives which are the biggest drivers of inclusion on the voters' roll. The 305 figures were not by accident. We had 2 dedicated drives. First in February when tertiary institutions and TVET colleges reopened. We targeted that community. In September, we appointed all voter registration ambassadors in each of the tertiary institutions, including TVET colleges, whose among the things that they needed to do was to register their schoolmates. And we see there's a yield from that, and we will persist with that approach in February next year, and again during the Democracy Month in the high school echelon, in high schools in the month of April. I will leave the question around the lessons that we are drawing from the report by the Gender Commission to Mr. Mosri. Kachen?
Morning, colleagues. There's 2 remaining questions. The report of the Gender Commission, yes, we do have a copy. And owing to the reconstitution of the commission, we've not had an opportunity to go through its details. But certainly some of the suggestions are policy related, which we do think that they would need to go to Parliament and be considered by Parliament. And if Parliament so agrees with them, they would probably move towards a policy framework in that direction. So that's where we are with that report. In terms of time, we may be looking at the beginning of 2026 for us to comment further on what is possible on that report. The timing of legislative amendments, they are critical for the election next year, and Parliament understands it so. And we are very hopeful that by the end of the first quarter in 2026, we would have moved sufficiently towards the conclusion of this. Towards the election itself, it looks possible that we can conclude. Part of that is that the 4 areas are not really areas that can create tension and disagreements. They are proposals to clean up the electoral process itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DCOs. Laura, are you covered from your end online? I'm happy. Let me take the last round of questions. Let me start on this corner and go that way. Thank you.
All right, Katlego Sotho again from Kaya 959. Mr. Shiburi, in terms of the, I know you've said e-voting is off the table completely, and there's been a number of consultations that have happened in terms of the electronic leg of voting and what that looks like. But considering the national elections last year, you did expand on some of the electronic elements, particularly the electronic voter management devices, the VMDs. There were some challenges during that time. Are those back on the table just in terms of the electronic advancement of the process of elections? Is that still something you're considering using again, perhaps just upgrading it or making it better?
Morning, Celinda Lomasigane from ENCA. I wanted to ask whether the IEC, during this planning phase, has picked up on any areas or municipalities, metros that are of concern, especially when we look at the rise in political killings when it comes to elections. So are there any provinces or areas that have been flagged that are of concern? And if so, are there processes to establish the safety and security for IEC officials in these particular areas? What are the conversations that are being had with the law enforcement and security officials? Yeah, I had another one. I hope Sis Kate will give me some grace.
All right.
For now,
Okay.
those are my two.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Isi.
Ndata Shiburi, just to follow up, I know you've painted the various scenarios for the elections, well, that are expected to take place next year. But do you think there are any compelling reasons for next year's elections to actually be held or to be called earlier, let's just say in October perhaps? I know I'm pushing my luck, but...
Thanks, Natasha. Let me pick up the last one.
It's Elise Parker from Caxton Media, Pretoria Record. Sir, can you more or less give us a ballpark budget? How much have you budgeted for the election?
All right. Thank you so much. I'm taking the very last one before I allow the DCOs to respond. Thank you so much. Let's proceed.
Tabi Sogoba from Eyewitness News. Mr. Shiburi, can you please just let us know what are the names of the 3 commissioners whose term expired today? I see in one of the pages in the presentation, there was a warning that issued to political parties in terms of interfering with voter education. You didn't speak on that. I don't know if, but it's in the presentation. I don't know if you care to expand there. I think with the question for funding, I'm partially covered by my previous colleague, but I also wanted to ask, we do know that over the years, there's been less and less funding for elections. What have been the consultations with Treasury, with the Minister of Finance in terms of financing the elections? And my last question, it's a bit of an ideological one. The IEC rejected the application for the Islamic State of Africa to register as a political party. And I do understand that 2 of those reasons were sort of administrative in terms of signatures and the advertising in municipal newspapers. But one of I think the third ground from the IEC was one of, in terms of, it received objections saying that the Islamic States of Africa would be antithetical to the country's secular values. I just want to ask, and as I said, this is a bit of an ideological question. We do have a party that is grounded in sort of religion, like the African Christian Democratic Party. Is a party, like, what makes it different? What makes the Islamic State of Africa different to the ACDP, which are both parties grounded in different religious beliefs? Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. DCOs? And then afterwards, that will be it. Ne? We covered with all our questions. We're good. You wanted to say something? No. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. The questions around the VMD, indeed, we will use the VMD in these elections. VMDs help us do a number of things. One, to register voters and to get the address of the voter at the point where we register them, so that we can comply with the Constitutional Court order in Mhlope that the voters' roll must contain addresses of voters where an address exists. An address on a voter's roll must serve two purposes. One, it must enable political parties to canvass voters, and secondly, it must ensure that persons only vote and influence election outcomes in areas in which they are ordinarily resident. So the first use of the voters' roll is to register voters, to get their addresses. And in the two previous cycles that we've used the voters, the VMDs, we've improved on our efficiency exponentially. For the first time, we were able to close voting stations on Sunday, and on Monday have a provisional voters' roll for inspection available to political parties, shortening the time frames. On voting day last year, we had challenges with the VMD. The VMD on election day runs 5 apps, which are all in-house developed. On voting day, we had a challenge with one app, which is the voters' roll app. In other words, what it did, instead of just scanning the ID number of a voter, sending that one message to our database to say this voter has been issued with ballots. What it did, it repeated the same transaction manifold, sometimes even over 1,000 times. And over time, it clocked our database, made the response time slower. And therefore, the Commission took a decision to set aside the VMD on voting day to continue with voting based on the manual voters' roll. We persist, we've looked at all those things, we have reviewed the code, we are testing it as we speak, and early next year we will subject it to external testing and validation to see that on election day, faced with a load of 38 VMDs, sending messages at the same time from across 23,000 points, the app will hold. So we think we have cured what was the shortcoming in the app, and therefore there is no reason to doubt using the VMD in next year's election. The areas of concern. The Commission works closely with state institutions. There is already an interministerial committee on election that has been set up, made up of a number of different ministries to support the electoral process. Similarly, the South African Police Services have also activated their net joint planning and operational centers for planning towards the election. So in that context, we will begin to receive indications of areas of concern and the mitigation steps that the relevant authority are taking and the steps that we as a commission may need to take. So far, we have not received any worrying warnings from those structures. Is it possible to hold an election earlier than November, say in October? It is notionally possible, but for that to happen, it means councillors in the 257 municipal councils across the country must adopt motions to dissolve themselves. So it is notionally possible, but the councils must take resolutions to dissolve themselves. Our allocation for next year is in the region of 2.1 billion. We are in discussion with National Treasury to see whether, even with the other competing priorities in the country, they may be able to avail funds from savings in the country. On our part, we have manufactured savings, which National Treasury has permitted us to carry over to the next financial year. But we are still in discussion with National Treasury. The refusal to register a political party. The difference, as we understand it, between this and other parties is that the party that you referred to, in its constitution, which is a founding document, stated that its purpose is to replace the secular nature and secular values that underpin the South African Constitution with the values based on Islamic law. And therefore, when the Commission received those objections, there were over 96 objections, if I'm not mistaken, the Commission formed an opinion that there is enough to suggest that the registration of that party may cause serious consternation on a sizable portion of the population. While the objections were received from Christian organizations, but the majority were from secular institutions and research institutions. So that was the basis and the distinction between this party and other parties that have identities that are non-secular. I would ask my colleague, Mr. Mosri, to deal with the question on the parties that has been fined, as well as the terms of commissioners and the names of commissioners whose terms came to an end.
Thank you, Mr. Shuri. Maybe just by way of extending the comment on election security. The mandate of securing citizens rests with the state apparatus. So they are responsible for the stabilization of communities and ensuring that elections do take place in a peaceful environment. And to that extent, the priority committee at a national level, at provincial levels, have been set up, and they are doing their work. And part of the work they do is to do assessments, as you questioned, and once an assessment has been done, they put in mitigating measures. On our part as the Commission, yes, we will be reviewing certain areas, particularly our storage points for election material, storage points for our special votes that are used for the 2 days before election. But all of that is part of planning, and there are no threats that are known at this stage. Just broadly commenting on the budget issues, we currently have a very professional and reasonable engagement with Treasury, which makes it possible that we could deal with the priorities in our budget. And the continuous engagement makes it possible. At this stage, we do not feel major constraints in us delivering a credible election for the country. With the budget available, we will do so. Now, on the warning we raise on political parties, we've observed a number of incidents which we're not sure whether they are deliberate, planned, or intentional, to interfere with the work of the Commission, particularly our civic education activities. And in a recent by-election in the Northwest, one of those political parties even posted a video on social media platforms, and we're dealing with those elements of what we regard as improper conduct by political parties and political party leaders, and we are saying they must stop interfering with the work of the Commission, and that's the call we are making in a broad sense. The commissioners whose term come to an end today, is Commissioner Msutu Miepa, Commissioner Dayapile, the judge in the commission, and Commissioner Dr. Nomsa Masuku. But as Mr. Shiburi outlined, they were all eligible to be appointed for another term, and 2 of them have been appointed for another term. Thank you.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, let me bring this press briefing to an end. Thank you so much for your support, and also those who are following this particular press briefing online will also be able to post their statement as well as the presentation that will be available on our website. So far, so good. Natasha, the elections are on. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Drive back safely home. Choo-choos. Bye-bye.